Two balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. This is way back. Walk the ball. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined tonight by Blake Williams, Sebastian Ibarra as well. Here to talk a ton about the Dodgers, a packed show. But guys, there's an old proverb that says, if a tree falls in the forest, does anybody hear it? If Matt Chapman signs a $54 million contract with the Giants, which literally just happened, does anybody care, Blake? Does anybody care?
No, I mean, it's not really a game changer for the Giants. It's good for them, but there's still a lot of talent away from being a competitive team. But kind of seemed like it was trending all offseason toward Chapman signing there. He's kind of had some struggles in the past with his offense. Fantastic defender, but the Giants just need more than that to actually compete.
A lot more than that would be my argument. But again, as we start this show live on Friday night, that deal just made official, or broken, I should say, by Jeff Paxton. Matt Chapman going to the Giants, $54 million on a 3-year deal. Lots to get to tonight. We're going to talk Kiké Hernández and an interesting quote that he had as he makes his Dodgers debut. We're going to talk about Tyler Glasnow. We're going to talk about James Paxton. We're going to talk about Gavin Lux's defense as well. And then a segment I'm very excited about, irresponsible spring training overreactions. We say that these things don't matter as long as they don't matter, and they matter when we want them to. So what are the things that if you got us in a quiet, alone space and you got into our mind a little bit, what are the things that we maybe believe more than we should believe based on a week or 10 days worth of spring training performances and narratives? So we got about 8 of those from Blake, myself, and Sebastian. So tons to get to tonight. But let's start with Kiké Hernández, guys. We know he signs with the Dodgers earlier, a 1-year, $4 million contract. He goes 1 for 2 in his debut on Friday with the Dodgers. His 2024 debut with the Dodgers, his first appearance since signing that contract. Lots to get to, but let's start with this, Sebastian. In that contract, in the quotes after the fact, he said he chose the Dodgers because they guaranteed that he would start against left-handed pitchers to begin the year. That gave them the edge over the Yankees, who were into it, a ton of other teams that were kind of slow playing it. So give me your reaction, Sebastian, to the idea that the Dodgers have guaranteed him to start the year that he would be in the lineup against lefties.
Yeah, you mentioned that the Yankees have a lot of right-handers in their lineup. Dodgers have a lot of lefties, so that kind of leaves room for him to platoon. Historically, the Dodgers kind of base this off. He's really good against lefties. Give him a shot at the beginning of the year, see what he could do against the lefties. And then I think what he said was, like, from there, who knows, but give him that shot to see if he could replicate his past success.
Yeah, not a surprise to me either, Blake, for all the reasons Sebastian mentioned. I mean, we know that once Margot was shipped out, that was kind of the role that had been earmarked for Margot. Now he's gone. Kiké Hernández slides into that. We know that the numbers last year weren't necessarily overwhelming against lefties, but for his career, this is kind of his MO. So do you like the idea of the Dodgers guaranteeing him this opportunity to begin the year?
Well, by overwhelming, I think we can just say it was bad. He had like a 72 weighted runs created plus versus lefties, about 30% worse than league average. I think they're betting on the upside that he's going to kind of figure it out and get back to being where he was before, or at least better than that. And it mostly seems like he's just taking over a Manny Margot spot in the lineup as the platoon guy out there, allowing Chris Taylor to fill the utility role more. But Kiké is also giving them more versatility if they end up needing it than Margot was providing. So I'm not really happy he's back. I'm not really upset he's back. To me, it's just kind of like it's the end of the roster type move. It probably won't make a huge impact. If he doesn't perform well, I think he's going to have maybe a bit of a shorter leash than he's had before, just because of his struggles last year. And with the Dodgers, he was better versus righties than he was versus lefties. So I don't think it's anything set in stone yet, and it's probably going to be moving pieces. They have a lot of young talent that could come up and contribute if Kiké falters. So we'll see how it is moving forward.
As you see it, it looks like first base, second base, shortstop, third base, right field, center field are all pretty much set, catcher as well. Right field is kind of the wild card. Do you think it's going to be as simple as Jason Hayward and Kiké Hernández platooning to start the year? Obviously, Chris Taylor is going to get spot starts here and there as well. But do you think it's pretty much, individual guys getting 80%, 85% of the at-bats in most places with the one exception being a Kiké Hernández and Jason Hayward platooning, right?
I think so. I think there's a chance we see Miguel Rojas take a good amount of starts at shortstop, at least to start the year specifically. I think we could see Teoscar Hernandez sliding over to right field to give guys day off and just kind of mix different matchups around. But I think they're pretty set overall mostly. We'll probably see Chris Taylor get some time at third base to take away from Muncy. But overall, yeah, it's a pretty set lineup right now.
I see a comment from Laura in the chat asking about some other comments that Kiké Hernández made this week, which was on our to-do list. These accusations of collusion. Blake, you and I have texted about this. He basically said, hey, a lot of teams lowballed me, but what was curious was that a lot of those teams contacted him around the same time with just about the same number. And so he didn't say collusion. He used the phrase C word a couple times in an interview there. You and I were texting about this. We see this differently. So I'll give you the floor first, Blake. Give me your thoughts on Hernandez's accusations. I think it's fair to call them accusations. So give me your thoughts.
I think there's something to it. I don't think we can really push it away because it's just Kiké Hernández and he's a backup middle infielder or outfielder, essentially, however you want to view him. And teams just don't really have a need for that. But I think it's more of he's pointing to the greater trend throughout baseball. Like we're here on March 1st, spring training is underway for every team, and Blake Snell is still a free agent. Jordan Montgomery is still a free agent. Matt Chapman just signed. Cody Bellinger just signed. Like it was taking a lot of time for these deals to come through, and a lot of the players kind of got underpaid from what their expectations were going into the offseason, or even what projections had them around, not just what the players were expecting to get. So I do think there might be still a little animosity from the owners toward the players after the kind of messy collective bargaining agreement issues they had 2 years ago now, I think it was. And I definitely think there's something to it. Whether they're colluding against Kiké specifically, probably not. But I also think there are some things to this where like the teams are maybe possibly working together and saying like, hey, this is what we're doing. You want to beat it, go for it. But this is how we see it. And there's probably something is to it.
Sebastian, what about you? When you look at the information we have, the guys who have signed, who haven't, the numbers that have come out, is the most reasonable explanation for this collusion or something else?
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit more with you where I just don't really see a huge market for him. You know, he's been a solid pro his whole career, but you know, not a whole lot of teams need that kind of utility man who could hit like around 240s. Yeah, I don't see a big market for him. So there could be like a little bit of spite, like Blake said, from the negotiations. That could be a role, but I see it more as just not a huge market for him.
Yeah, my comment originally when Blake and I were texting was it's not an awesome look when a guy with a negative 1.4 wins above replacement is the one crying collusion, because I think you could make a case that if he had gotten a minor league deal with an invite to spring training kind of a thing, I don't think that would have been the most shocking outcome. I understand that, you know, he's making a bigger point about baseball, but I would even say about some of these other ones like Cody Bellinger. The reason everybody's looking at Cody Bellinger and saying, wow, he only got 3 years, 80 is because Scott Boras came out and said he thought he was going to get 200 million, which was absolutely insane. I think the deal Bellinger got makes sense to me. Like, I think that's a fair number. Blake Snell, the guy who's still out there. There are massive question marks about Blake Snell and his walk rate. And yes, he's really, really good. Like, he deserves to get paid a lot of money. But if he's expecting a $200 million contract, then I understand why he hasn't been signed yet. And so is it possible teams are colluding? Of course it is. My overall point on Kiké Hernández, Blake, is he's the wrong guy to be the messenger. Of course, he just signed, so he can be the messenger now because he has $4 million in his bank account. But I just struggle when I look at some of the guys who would maybe be sort of test case A, B, and C for there being collusion. I'm like, I don't know. I think Bellinger got the deal that he deserves.
I do think there's something to it that a lot of the free agents this year have been flawed, kind of, and maybe in past years they would have got paid more, and now teams are kind of being a little smarter about the contracts given out. But we went into this offseason talking about how every team needs like 2 or 3 starting pitchers, basically, and to have 2 of the top ones available, even with their flaws, they're still going to produce for you, and they're still very talented pitchers. To still be sitting there in the free agent market, it's just pretty wild. And regarding Kiké being the one to bring it up, I think it would be tough for Snell or Montgomery to bring that up right now while they're negotiating with teams and trying to get a deal. It's probably not a great look to maybe make some teams more mad and possibly have them back out of deals. And Kiké is a guy who has spoken pretty freely in the past. It is a players' union. All the players stick together. It's kind of like a brotherhood. So if Kiké felt he wanted to speak out and kind of address that, I don't see any problem with it. He's still a major league player. Sure, he might have been able to sign a minor league contract, but the Dodgers valued him enough to give him a major league deal. So we can say he is a major league player. And with that, he has the right to speak out on behalf of the union and the players and address the issue that's going on.
Yeah. Montgomery being the third guy. I mean, it's just interesting, Blake. I'm imagining in my head if Montgomery had come to LA, how quickly we'd be arguing about his 7 point something strikeouts per 9. So again, he's a really good pitcher. The ERA, the expected ERA, the FIP, those are all solid numbers. Without knowing exactly what he's asking for, it's tough. Sebastian, last word from you here on collusion before we move on.
Yeah, a little bit alluding to what Blake said. Obviously, the Kiké situation is a little bit different, but like the Cody and Snell, they're both different positions. But I kind of think back to like the days where the Angels give out huge contracts to Pujols and Hamilton and, you know, like those kind of caliber players. Obviously, those guys were a lot older than Cody, but I think it is a trend of more major league clubs trending towards not giving out those huge contracts and kind of trying to be smarter with their money.
Yeah, I think it's totally again, I think we're all agreeing that there are flawed guys out there. And so it's not to say there is or there isn't maybe definitively, as much as it's just harder to tell this year. Ohtani, no issues. Yamamoto, no issues. A lot of these, even Imanaga got paid way more than any of us expected him to get paid. And so I think it's a bit of a mix of both. Let's talk about one other guy who did get paid, who was acquired by the Dodgers, Blake, and that's Tyler Glasnow. He pitched tonight, his second appearance this spring. He went 3 innings, which is the most we've seen the Dodgers pitchers go. And oh, by the way, 5 strikeouts, all of them swinging, 3 scoreless innings against Cleveland tonight, just 1 batter reached. This is his MO, 96th percentile whiff rate guy. Last year, we see it here. When he's healthy, is this what you're expecting to see a lot more of this year?
Yeah, I would say so. 5 strikeouts in 3 innings. It's kind of what we want from Tyler Glasnow. His first start out, he dealt with some nerves, and it was a bit of a struggle for him. But this time out, he really came and showed who he is as a pitcher. And I think that's more his true talent level. Like, we've never questioned the talent or ability of Tyler Glasnow. It's always been about how many innings is he going to end up throwing. So I think there's reason to be optimistic about his health. And as long as he stays healthy, I think he's going to be in contention for some awards at the end of the season and possibly starting the Dodgers' first playoff game.
Yeah, and we've got some irresponsible spring training overreactions yet to come, one specifically from Blake that involves Tyler Glasnow. So we'll leave it at that for now. But Sebastian, give me your thoughts on how this start compared to his first start.
Yeah, so we all like to say it. Everyone knows at this point, spring training, take it with a grain of salt. Obviously, shouldn't swing too far in the other direction this start from last start.
Yeah.
But it is good to see him making those, because he talked about his last start, how it was more about his process and kind of feeling it out again, back on the mound for the first time. So it's good to see him making those, taking the stuff that he learned from his first start and making those adjustments in the second and looking a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, to your point, like if we were going to sit here a week ago and say, oh, 1 2/3, 4 hits and a walk, 1 strikeout, 1 earned run, and say, oh, who cares? It's spring training. It's really tough for us to come back a week later and say 3 innings, no hits, 5 strikeouts. Look at this guy. But I will repeat it ad nauseum. You shouldn't have dramatic changes of your opinion necessarily on guys. But if you feel really good about Tyler Glasnow and he makes a second appearance that is much better than the first, and he does the things we've seen him do when healthy previously, then you should feel good about it. To me, the headline here is that it was 5 strikeouts, yes, but the swing and miss stuff. I mean, if there's one thing I've learned as I've become more educated as a baseball fan on how to evaluate pitching over the last few years, it's recognizing the difference between a strikeout looking and a strikeout swinging. And when you get 5 strikeouts all swinging, that tells you how nasty his stuff is, that it's not that he's fooling guys that they aren't even swinging at it. It's that he's fooling guys and they think they're going to hit it and they miss. And so awesome stuff from Tyler Glasnow tonight. Yesterday, Blake, another guy that was really, really positive. And James Paxton, 4 strikeouts, only 4 strikeouts in 2 innings for him, though. And I'm gonna press pause on you, Blake, because I know you've got thoughts on Big Maple here, and you're gonna save those for later when we get to some overreactions. So actually, Sebastian, let me come to you on James Paxton. 4 strikeouts in 2 innings, 1 run, but I'll be honest, it was a hard hit ball from Ellie De La Cruz, then a bloop, then a sac fly. No issue to me on the 1 earned run. Just some bad, unlucky sequencing as far as I'm concerned. But give me your thoughts on Paxton, kind of big picture for the Dodgers as it relates to what you saw from him on Thursday night.
Yeah, so when I was doing some research on him, taking a look at kind of his past seasons, I looked at 2023 with the Red Sox. He had a higher ERA than his past couple ones. He had some injury trouble in between these two, but last year with the Red Sox, he had a 9.5 K per 9. And then taking a look at his last full year with the Yankees, or his best full year with the Yankees in 2019, he had a 11.1 K per 9. So I think the Dodgers, kind of what they see in him and what they saw in him when they signed him to that deal in the offseason was, let's see if we could get him back to that, or if we could get somewhere in the middle, closer to that 2019 season, then I think they'll be really happy with their investment and keeping him in that fourth or fifth, probably 4th starter spot until hopefully one of these guys, one of our pitchers that are hurt, come back.
Yeah.
And I know Blake has some reservations about that possibility, but we'll get to that later.
We'll get to that. Blake's got an irresponsible spring training overreaction as it relates to James Paxton. And so I'm just going to leave that as a little bit of teaser. He's got some big love for Big Maple. We'll put it that way. But Sebastian, I think you make a great point when you look at those numbers. For those unfamiliar with Paxton, 2019, as you said, 150 innings. That's for the Yankees. He comes back, throws just 20 innings in 2021, 1 inning in 2020, 20 innings in 2020. 1 inning in 2021, no innings in 2022, 96 innings last year. And so you look at those last kind of big sample size years, 2019, 3.8 ERA, 3.86 FIP, 3.69 expected ERA, all really good, in part because of the 11 strikeouts per 9. Last year, the ERA is 4.5. The expected ERA, 3.82, 4.68 FIP. Again, when he got injured, how much better he looked at the beginning of the year versus the end. All caveats included there. But the big number for that you point out is the strikeouts per 9 is down to 9.5. So 1.6 less than in 2019. And to your point, if 4 strikeouts in 2 innings, it's spring training, we're not overreacting. But if that K per 9 can get to double digits, can get to 10 and inching towards 11 because the Dodgers can tweak something, he's more healthy now, whatever it is, that would be a game changer for him. That would be a game changer for the Dodgers. And it would just up the ceiling and the floor of a guy like Paxton. Because while I'm not expecting Paxton to be in the Cy Young race or to be an all-star, if you're striking out 10 and a half per 9, like the floor of what you're going to be as a starting pitcher is much higher. And for the Dodgers, that's what they would be looking for. A veteran at the back end who could just give them a high floor and maybe tap in to an even higher ceiling. So again, I'll press pause on our Paxton conversation there because we've got more thoughts to come. The hotter takes are yet to come on James Paxton if these haven't been hot enough. But let's go one more topic before we get to those spring training overreactions. And that's a question about Gavin Lux. And maybe this is a perfect entry point into the spring training overreactions. In his first 2 opportunities to make a play at shortstop, Gavin Lux had 2 errors. I believe he's 1 for 3 on the spring, and maybe that one came somewhere in between. But the bottom line is he has 2 errors. I don't think the second one was technically marked as an error. It was definitely an error. How concerned are you, Blake, about the defense of Gavin Lux at shortstop?
I'm very concerned. I'm going to say it's not just because of the spring training, because he hasn't played in basically more than a year now. So
yeah,
it's his first time coming back. It's been a while. He's going to have rust, but I think the defense has always been a concern with him. And that's what's the more concerning part of this all. Like, if he came out and he made his plays that he was supposed to make, I think I'd still have concerns about the defense, but it's not very comforting to see him go out there and make 2 errors on his first 2 attempts, or even if you don't want to call this second one an error or whatever it was pretty much an error. We all know it was an error. So it's just not ideal to see. We'll see if he can kind of shake off the rust and get more settled in. Hopefully, I think we're all kind of hoping maybe that he's just going to be fine or passable at shortstop, which he hasn't been so far this spring training, which is the concern there. But I mean, I'm not too concerned, more so than I would have been heading into spring training either.
Got it. So you would say you're very concerned, but your level of concern has not changed based on what you've seen. Is that fair?
I think logically I haven't changed, but like the other side of me, maybe the more irrational side, is a little more concerned.
Oh, we're familiar with the irrational side. I'm just kidding, Blake. Come on, just being nice here. I think what you're saying, like I've been the Lux guy on here. I've been the Lux defender. I'm buying, like, I want to believe the bounce back. My biggest concern is the mental thing. This is a guy that's seen, I feel like over and over again, we have seen the mental piece get in the way of everything else. Like there's no doubt he has the capacity to play shortstop, in my opinion. There's no doubt he has the capacity to be a borderline all-star level major league player at some point. The problem has been if he gets into these little ruts, little things become big things, it feels like. And Sebastian, for me, that would be my concern if I was the Dodgers. It's not so much like, does he have the physical tools to play this position? It's more so, how do we convince this guy he has the physical tools? Because every time he makes a simple mistake, and he's already made 2 in just 3 opportunities, I feel like we're on the verge of this going sideways and sideways fast.
Yeah, you know, you never want to give up on a player as a fan, but obviously, like the coaching staff, you don't want to give up on a player who has such promise.
Yeah.
I'd say in the short term, you know, well, addressing your question, there's really they got to figure out how to, I wouldn't call it yips, but like there is like that mental side that you have to overcome, and then kind of just his outlook on this season. You want to say you'd like to think that they'd have a short leash on him, just because you can't really afford with your aspirations to be having question marks at a premium defensive position like shortstop. Long-term outlook, you know, they need to find, if it doesn't work out this season, they need to find a place for him. You know, he can't play second. Mookie's there. A move to the outfield maybe, but that's already crowded this year. DH is Shohei whenever he's not pitching.
Shohei for the next decade. You could cross off any potential DH for the next 10 years, basically.
So there really isn't a spot for him if he can't lock down that shortstop spot. And then you look at the prospects that they traded for. They traded for Trey Sweeney, who's a shortstop, but they are trying to get him some more versatility in the infield. But they also traded for another shortstop in that Margot trade. So they have backup. They have a future plan in place, but they just need to figure out if Gavin Lux is a free agent in 2027. So they need to see if he figures into their long-term plans.
Blake, I'm watching people in the comments right now, and I'll just ask this as simply as possible. Is shortstop the position that Gavin Lux going to be a major league player at?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I'm going to say yes, but it might not be with the Dodgers long term.
Okay. Talk me through that.
I just don't think they're going to be willing to pay him when he reaches free agency, because I think he's going to be kind of a fringe type shortstop. Like, I just don't see them investing in him long term. They have a few other prospects in the minor leagues who could probably take over that role. There's one of our favorites in the free agent market next year, one Willy Adames, which I know you love that one.
No,
me and Scott are on the Willy Adames bandwagon. So I think he would be better suited maybe long term for another team that isn't the Dodgers.
So including this year, he's got 3 more years under contract. So like, do you expect him to be primarily a shortstop for those 3 years, Blake? Or do you think we're nearing him needing to move to the outfield? I mean, it feels like Mookie Betts is confirmed at second. So like, I think we can cross off any possibility of Gavin Lux moving to second, Mookie Betts moving into the outfield, at least barring something crazy happening. But like, will Gavin Lux be primarily a shortstop for the next 3 years? Or do you think the left field experiment continues at some point in the near future? Because look, Teoscar Hernandez is on a 1-year deal. They got some young prospects that could play the outfield that we're talking about in a little bit here. Pages, Ramos, obviously Miguel Vargas getting moved out there. But Blake, I'll ask you, and then we'll come to Sebastian. In the next 3 years, is Gavin Lux's primary position going to remain shortstop?
Yes, and I'll say it comes with a trade.
Okay.
So I don't think the Dodgers are going to keep him there for 3 years unless he makes some serious improvements. Wouldn't shock me if he ends up in the outfield, which is something I've advocated for before. I feel like he's athletic enough to play there, and then he can just kind of let it rip with his arm and not have to worry about any throwing issues or anything like that, really. So seems like a good fit for him out there, but they also have some prospects that are going to crowd the outfield a bit potentially. So I just feel like they might say, hey, this is a guy we can upgrade from and use in a trade to bring back maybe another pitcher, maybe a different position they need, or kind of get something they need for him. And especially if they're not going to commit to him on a long-term deal, they could probably just find an upgrade somewhere else.
Sebastian, you agree with that shortstop may be his primary position for the next 3 years, but not as a Dodger?
I'd say a team will take a chance on him, and then I do agree with Blake that his future, I wouldn't want it to be, but his future might be with another team just because the Dodgers are kind of loaded at every position in the immediate and with prospects. So I think a team would give him a shot at shortstop, and then if not, they'd move him. But you really hate to give up on. You'd like to see him succeed because you really don't want to give up. I really believe in his bat, and that would hurt in any kind of situation where Gavin Lux leaves the team, is missing that his potential form that he could fill into with that bat, but it might be with another team.
Yeah, look, sometimes you got to just look at your roster and say, okay, if Mookie Betts is long-term going to be a second baseman, if Shohei Ohtani is here, and of course he can play the outfield eventually, but I think he's going to be a lot of DH. Sometimes you just have to look and say, if it doesn't work out at shortstop for Gavin Lux, a team that has second base open, a team that can experiment and have a little more flexibility in the outfield might be a team that's a better fit for him. And I'm not totally there yet. Like, I still think there's a chance that he can just get over the mental hurdle and put together a 3 or 4 month stretch of solid defense at shortstop. Then maybe that allows him to just sort of get some momentum going in the right direction. But it's hard not to be concerned about what we've seen. Small sample size, yes, but 2 errors is 2 errors. And that's a concerning thing for Gavin Lux. Blake, I see a smile on your face as I say that.
How about a nice little trade deadline deal when Lux isn't working out? Send him to Milwaukee, get one Devin Williams and one Willy Adames back.
Devin Williams, fine. Willy Adames, no, thank you.
He's gonna play defense and hit homers. That's what you need there.
Give me the airbender.
Yeah, and he's a below average offensive player, so we can move on with that. But we can do Willy Adames later. All right, let's get into a segment, guys, that I'm very excited about. It's called Irresponsible Spring Training Overreactions. You've heard us say this 100 times. Spring training is borderline meaningless. I'm not going to say fully meaningless. It's borderline meaningless, especially the first week of spring training, which is basically all that we have under our belts. And yet, here we are talking about the Dodgers, and I asked these two guys and put my head down as well and said, what are the things that after a week and after a month of narratives, all the pitchers and catchers reporting stuff, the reports from Camelback Ranch, guys showing up in the best shape of their life, what are the things that we're maybe not willing to bet our life on, but if if we got a little oiled up, that we might say at a party, in a social setting, a claim we might make as it relates to the Dodgers? What are the irresponsible overreactions we might have? We've got 8 of them. And Blake, I know you've been biting your tongue on this one for a while, so I will go first. I will allow you to go first. Big Maple, big 2024. The floor is yours.
Yeah, so my first one is James Paxton is going to be a top 4 starting pitcher for the Dodgers all year. I think if you look back at what he was doing last year, he was fantastic in the first half of the season. He had a 2.73 ERA, and then as he started to pitch deeper into the year, it started to fall off a bit. He attributed that to his health and kind of getting tired. If you look at his years before last year, he didn't pitch a whole lot of innings, so he was still kind of building up and basically fresh to pitching again. In 2021, he threw 1 inning, and in 2022, he threw 20 innings. In 2022, he threw none. In 2020, he threw 20, and in 2021, he threw 1. So It's a guy who hasn't pitched a lot, and he still needed to build up. So it was very encouraging to see him be so effective when he was healthy and fresh at the beginning of the year. And I think another year kind of building back up and gaining that strength will help him finish the year better. He said he allowed something like 19 runs in his final few starts of the year, and it was maybe like 6 innings or something like that, and it really inflated his ERA. And I think any tweaks the Dodgers can make with him will help him out a lot. We saw what they've done with Tyler Anderson and a lot of these types of pitchers in the past. And before Paxton had his injuries, he was a guy who was basically a perennial 4-win player every year. So I think he's going to be that kind of pitcher again with the Dodgers and finish the year as one of their top 4 pitchers.
Yeah, I was going back and looking. It was 16 earned runs over his last 3 outings. He had a 3.34 ERA going into those 3 outings, and then he proceeded to allow 6, 4, and 6 in a combined 10 innings of pitching. So, to your point, my only question for you, Blake, is you're saying Paxton's going to be the number 4 starter. You're high on Bobby Miller. You're also high on Emmett Sheehan. So, which of those 2 guys do you have him ahead of? We know he's ahead of Kershaw and Walker Buehler in your book. That much is abundantly clear. But do you have him ahead of Sheehan too?
I feel like I've made my Miller case pretty clear that he's going to jump into ace category too.
You've made your Sheehan case clear too. That's why I'm confused.
I think Sheehan is very good. I think they're going to be kind of limiting him a little more. I don't think he's going to be given that full runway to pitch as much as Paxton will. I mean, the 5th spot is still up for grabs in the rotation. Sheehan hasn't locked down a spot, whereas Paxton has. Wouldn't totally shock me if they send Sheehan to AAA and kind of get him more seasoning there, and maybe Gavin Stone or Landon Knack or someone makes a team out of spring training, and then they kind of see how that goes until maybe Walker Buehler or someone else is back. So I'm just saying, I don't think Sheehan has a spot locked up, whereas Paxton does. And I think Paxton is probably a better pitcher at this point than Sheehan is. I think Sheehan has a lot of upside and he can be a fantastic piece. There's a lot of talent, but he's also kind of raw as a pitcher, as we saw at times last year. He still struggled with his control and walk issues, and he wasn't always as effective as the talent showed. So I think he still has some growing to do, whereas Paxton's more of a developed product.
And to be clear, because people in the chat are asking, if Buehler is back pitching this year, if Kershaw is back pitching this year, you have Paxton ahead of both of those guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Buehler, when he comes back, I think he's going to be limited in his effectiveness, and I've kind of projected him from a low 4s to a mid 4s ERA for the year. I think that's where a lot of the projection systems have him too. And Kershaw, I don't think he's going to throw many innings at all. And if he does come back, we might see like 20 innings, but not enough for him to like take over that 4th spot from Paxton. So that's just kind of my view on it.
Sebastian, I think the top 3 of Glasnow, Yamamoto, and Miller, I don't think anybody, you're not going to get a ton of argument about those 3. For you, when it comes to Sheehan, Stone, Kershaw, Buehler, and Paxton, where does he stack up? Where does he fit in if all those guys are healthy?
If all of them are healthy, are we thinking like what Blake said, where like they'll be limited, or they're just good to go?
I'll let you define health.
Right.
I mean, I'm assuming they're healthy and pitching, which means they're capable of, whatever degree of success you believe, like a Walker Buehler after a couple years out, Kershaw after shoulder surgery, that kind of thing. So assuming the Dodgers trust them enough to hand them a ball and say, go get me 4 or 5 innings, where would Paxton fit?
Yeah, I'd say Paxton would be 4th. And then I think I trust Kershaw's return a little bit more than Walker.
Okay.
So probably 5th and Kersh. But then I still want to see, like, the optimist, I still think Kershaw has something to prove and something to give. And then I kind of want to see the youngsters get a shot. So to start the year, my answer is to start the year, I see Paxton being 4. And then as the year goes on, I think, and I hope, the other options kind of overtake him and he goes to the 5th, but he'll still be a good piece in the rotation.
Yeah. I mean, I think Kershaw's ahead of him if Kershaw's pitching this year. If Kershaw gets to a point where they trust him to hand him the baseball, I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. When Clayton Kershaw has pitched, he has always been good in large sample size. You could take 2 or 3 starts and point to something. The ERA has never been bad. So I will take Clayton Kershaw over James Paxton. I'm not anti, like Blake. I was kind of making the same argument that you were, like that 3.3 ERA going into his final 3 starts last year, and the explanation that he gave. Obviously, it's a convenient explanation. It's also a reasonable one for why he struggled. Ironically, he missed about as much time over a 2-year stretch as Walker Buehler has missed over the 2-year stretch. Now he's a year removed, and it's a different injury, but it's just interesting to see kind of how those two play off one another. But I like Emmett Sheehan, but I like Paxton too. So I think Sheehan and Paxton are pretty close. I was surprised, Blake, to hear that you had Paxton ahead of Sheehan, but I think that speaks to how high you are on Paxton, because it's not to say you're not high on Sheehan. So I would have Kershaw ahead of all those guys. I would probably have Paxton, Sheehan, Buehler kind of in a pretty tight mix would be sort of my view on that group. So let's go to next irresponsible spring training overreaction. This one's going to be from me, and it's a Shohei Ohtani overreaction. I think we get a career high in home runs from Shohei Ohtani in 2024. I'm going to put the number at 55. He's never had 50, but holy crap. I mean, the hype on this guy could not be more. Like, there could not be more talk about him, and yet it seems like he's living up to every single iota of hype that has been said about him, from batting practices, from soft toss, to showing up in a game and hitting his home run in his first game. I just think he's going to be entirely focused on hitting. Yes, he did that in 2019, but he's a far stronger, he's a far bigger, he's a far more mature player now. Add him to this lineup, add him to games that are going to be meaningful. I just think Shohei Ohtani, career high 55 home runs. That's my prediction. Blake, am I crazy for this one?
No, I don't think I'd bet on it, but also like with Ohtani, there's nothing we can count out for him. Like if you told me he was hitting 70, I'd probably give you the same answer as like, yeah, probably not, but it could happen. So if you're setting it around 50, like, yeah, I'll take that. I don't think it's that crazy or out of the ordinary of something he'd do. I would say my concern and pushback to that would be Ohtani is a guy who thinks about everything a lot, and when he's not going to be able to pitch, that's going to take away some of his thoughts from his hitting. Is he going to start to overthink the hitting side of it and maybe go like a little too far into his hitting and start tweaking things too much, or maybe getting into his head a little? I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's just something that might be a possibility that could come up that could prevent him from maybe getting to that 50 mark. Maybe he goes on a bad stretch or something for a little bit. So it wouldn't shock me if he does, but I think there are still a little concerns with him.
Sebastian, he had 44 home runs, but he missed about 30 games last season. It's not to say he's going to play 162 this year, but with only needing to be the DH, do you think 55 is a crazy ask for Ohtani?
I'm with you. I think he's at least 50. I think the biggest factor in all of this is just the lineup. Yeah, he had Trout with the Angels, but you can't compare the Angels to this
diminished version of Trout.
Yeah. You can't. I think that's going to be the biggest factor. It's just going to be the constant pressure on the opposing pitchers. That's just going to drain them, and I think that'll really help them have more opportunities, have better counts, better situations, all that stuff. And I think he could get to 50.
All right. Next one up, Sebastian, your first one here. You have some irrational overreactions here to Dodgers pitching. The staff as a whole, how good is this group going to be?
Yeah, so my overreaction is that they're going to be top 3 in ERA, and I have a whole bunch of numbers here. So last season, in team ERA overall, they were 13th, but they were really helped out by the bullpen. In starting pitching ERA, they were 20th. And I think this year they really get back into form where from 2022 to 2019, they were first in team ERA. From 2018 in 2018 and 2017, they were second in team ERA. 2016 and 2015, they were number 5. And in 2014, they were number 6.
Okay.
So the only year they were outside the last time they were outside the top 5 in team ERA was 2014.
Wow.
In that same time, the starting pitching, can you guess what was I already told you they were 13th or they were 20th last year. Can you guess what was the lowest in that same stretch from 2023 to 2014? What was the lowest they ranked in starter ERA?
Like
10th?
The number or?
Yeah, ranked.
The lowest? 7th or something like that.
Okay. Jeff?
I guess 10th.
Oh, it was 6th. The lowest, they were 6th. And to go from 6th being your lowest in that stretch to 20th last year, it just shows the struggles they had with starting pitching, mostly to injury, trying to cobble together a rotation to throw innings, but still. And you could tell that was a big reason they addressed it in the offseason. I think all the additions they make this year are going to pay off, and you'll see them back where they belong, top 3 in total team ERA, because the bullpen's always been a good strength of this team. But I think they're back in form this season.
look, we just had an argument about who's their fourth best pitcher, and we threw like 5 names out there. And so if any of us are even remotely close to right on how good Paxton's going to be, how good we all think Sheehan's going to be, and if folks like me who are optimistic about Kershaw and Buehler and Gavin Stone, who we're going to get to here in a minute, like I think everything you said makes sense. Blake, is there anything other than health in your estimation that could make the overreaction that Sebastian just described not true?
I don't think so. Like, I think an overreaction from me from this perspective might be just locking him into the number 1 spot in ERA.
Yeah.
Like, I think going top 3 is a little bit of a cop out here for how good they could be.
Sorry, Blake. Jeez.
Yeah. So that's just how I'm looking at. Like, I think they have all the talent and depth they need to be a top pitching staff, and I don't really see anything other than health throwing them off. Like, I talked down about Walker Buehler, but it's from a very Dodger perspective. Like, a 4.5 ERA or something on the Dodgers is, you're talking about your number 6 or 7 starter on probably 25 or more other teams. That's your number 3. So I think we kind of overlook some of those things as Dodger fans sometimes, but that's just how good and talented the team is right now.
Holy smokes. I need to make sure Matt clips that out, because that was the nicest thing you've said about Walker Buehler in a long, long time, Blake. You just said he'd be a number 3 starter on most teams in the league.
I think that's what I've always kind of argued about him. But from a Dodger perspective on a Dodger podcast, when we talk about that, like, he's not a top 5 pitcher on this team.
Cooked and a number 3 starter on most teams in the league. There's a gap between those two.
Going from an ace to a middle of the rotation starter, I think, is a good definition for cooked.
Yeah. Disagree. Blake, you're up next, and just perfectly on cue here. We've got negativity from Blake. So give me your overreaction. Not a Jason Hayward guy in 2024.
Yeah, I didn't love the signing when they first brought him back. I thought he kind of overperformed his numbers last year, and I think he ends up possibly losing a spot, or at least losing a lot of playing time throughout the year. He hasn't looked good in spring training so far, which I know it's spring training. We can't put a ton of stock into it, but I think there is a little more concern when his batted ball numbers weren't amazing last year, and there seemed to be a little luck involved. He started the year hitting the ball really hard, and then it kind of trailed off near the end. So the Dodgers have a lot of young talent in their minor leagues, and there's some outfielders who have been really impressing in spring training. So if Hayward gets off to a poor start and keeps playing poorly, then maybe an Andy Pajes comes up and they get some life into the lineup and another righty bat in that way. Maybe Kiké or Chris Taylor kind of steps up and takes over one of those spots. But on the other hand, this is also the team that played an injured and struggling David Peralta into the playoffs last year and started him pretty much every game. So I can't say he would totally lose a spot, but it wouldn't shock me if Hayward ends up losing a lot of playing time as opposed to a starting role he has now.
I mean, the only sort of pushback that I would give off the top is, for him to lose his starting job, I think he'd have to lose his roster spot. Like, they don't have a spot on the roster for him to not be starting, but still be on the roster, right?
I think they have enough versatility where they could make it work as like a lefty bat off the bench, and you could put him in the outfield if you need to. I think he even played first base a little last year, so he has some versatility. I think they've shown they care a lot about clubhouse guys, which is why we still see Austin Barnes on the roster and why they brought back Kiké Hernández. So I don't think they would necessarily just outright move on from him, but if he moves to a bench role, it really wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking, like you mentioned, a guy like Pajes, like they wouldn't be able to bring somebody like that up without moving him off of the roster because the 26 man is full. So unless it's Kiké Hernández or Chris Taylor becoming everyday outfielders, their hands are going to be tied. So look, I've said all along, I like Jason Hayward. I think he's going to be fine. I don't think he's going to be as bad as Peralta was over the course of last season. I think because of his clubhouse thing, because of the defense, I think the bat's going to be good enough at worst to justify his spot. But if what you're saying is true, I just think it's interesting because the Dodgers will have a tough decision on their hands with how they handle that moving forward. Sebastian, what about you? I mean, did you like the Jason Hayward signing when it was made, or do you share some of the reservations that Blake does?
I mean, I liked the signing when it first happened because you always want to be prepared. You didn't know that Pajes was going to recover the way he has looked so far. You can't really foresee, unless you're really into it, kind of the rise of Jose Ramos. So it's always good to have that plan in place. I do see kind of I would think that calling up one of these youngsters, because they do have a lot of good options in their system, bringing them up. The one thing that would be blocking that is they do seem to value like veterans in the locker room and kind of paying them the respect that they've earned over their career.
Yeah.
If that were to somehow happen, I do think like one, Pages getting called up, and I'm getting into that a little bit later, I think, in another point, but with Jose Ramos, he's not currently on the 40 man right now. And so I don't see a lot of teams picking up a Jason Hayward because he could still be with the team. I don't see a lot of teams picking up a Jason Hayward if he gets removed from the 40 man and replaced with Jose. If like he's really struggling at some point, the Dodgers can still keep them in him in the organization. I don't see, like I said, another team taking him. So that could be something, but I do think the most likely thing is he stays with the team and kind of is that defensive kind of guy with a good enough bat.
Yeah, I mean, when Miguel Rojas has a spot on the roster and Austin Barnes has a spot on the roster, like there's only so many of those like sort of spots that you can just hand out to guys that aren't really going to be playing all that much and have very, very, very hyper specialized roles. And obviously Barnes a backup catcher, so he probably belongs in a different conversation. But again, I like Jason Hayward. I'm not saying you're totally wrong. I just when you do the math here, they would need to replace him with somebody who's not on the 26-man roster. I mean, I think you and I are in agreement. Like, I don't think Jason Hayward is going to stick around in an organization if he's not on the 40-man and be a minor league guy. Like, that's not going to happen. But I'm doing the math, Blake, and saying, okay, Pages, Ramos, sure. Like Vargas even, sure. Whose spot are they taking?
You're missing the part where the Dodgers put him on the IL for a nice 2 months or something and let him just kind of chill there because of a random injury that just randomly came up, and then they make some room that way.
Fair. All right, let's move on. Next one's from me, and it goes along kind of what Sebastian was saying earlier. I think the Dodgers bullpen is going to be elite this year, and I've always been the high man on the Dodgers bullpen. When everybody is panicking, I'm telling people to calm down. I would say I've been right far more often than I have been wrong. But when I look at this bullpen and when I overreact to 1 or 2 appearances in spring training, you guys, look, we know Evan Phillips, he's nasty. Blake Treinen, if this guy can get back to 85-90% of what he used to be when he was one of the best relief pitchers in all of baseball, 2 scoreless innings in spring training. Come on, who's not getting fired up about that? Daniel Hudson, pair of strikeouts, a little nasty wipeout slide piece the other day. Brusdar Graterol, we know, entering in the prime of his career. Ryan Brazier had a 1 ERA last year with the Dodgers. Then we're talking about Joe Kelly, JP Feyereisen fighting for who gets to be the 6th best bullpen guy in this group. Not to mention some starters who might get mixed in here just to get some relief appearances. But Sebastian, when I look at this bullpen, I know how fragile they are, and I can already hear Blake in my ear telling me don't trust anything about relievers. But if we can't trust the Dodgers relievers, Sebastian, I don't know who in the world we could possibly trust.
Yeah, I'm with you all the way. I think the one question mark, and it's not a huge one, but the one question mark is kind of the lefty situation in the bullpen. Yeah. They have a lot of guys who are either unproven or need to bounce back. Yeah. The bounce back candidate is Vesia. He had a rough year last year, a 4.35 ERA, but I think they're banking on the previous 2 years where he had a 2.25 and a 2.15. So he's the bounce back kind of candidate. The other guys are kind of unproven. So that's just the one big question mark, but that's something that could be addressed later on in the season. But otherwise, the bullpen should be pretty dang good.
Blake, go ahead.
You already know what I'm going to say. Do you just want to say it for me?
No, I want you to be on the record saying it. When I talk positively about the Dodgers bullpen, I want you to poo-poo on it a little bit.
I do believe their bullpen has all the talent they need to be elite, and I think overall it's going to be a very good group. My pushback is, of course, going to be you never know what you're going to get with relievers. Last year, when we were entering into the year and looking at the roster, I think all of us said the bullpen is the last thing we're going to worry about. They have everything. They're set. It's going to be an elite group. And then for the first few months of the season, I think we all gave the bullpen an F grade when we were doing our rankings on that and said, like, how are they going to figure it out? The sky's falling. They're not going to do anything if the bullpen keeps pitching like this. And it basically felt like the end of the season because their bullpen was so bad. And that was the group we thought was going to be their one safe spot for sure, guaranteed locked into being great on the roster. So you just really never know with relievers. I think the Dodgers have all the talent. I think they are going to be elite, but if something goes wrong, like that's just how relievers go, and you just don't really know. Like we could see Treinen end up struggling as he comes back or gets hurt again. Same thing with Fireisen. Same thing with Daniel Hudson. Maybe Evan Phillips regresses a bit. Maybe Bruce Gratterall's lack of strikeouts come back to hurt him. Maybe Ryan Brazier regresses. Like there's just so many scenarios where the bullpen, it could go
forgot
wrong.
to crap on Joe Kelly. Joe Kelly real quick. He doesn't
Joe
want to be
Kelly,
left out.
His command issues all the time. Like maybe he just totally loses it and can't find the zone.
Okay.
Like it's just with all
Did
the relievers.
Gratterall? Was Gratterall
Yeah,
in there?
I said the lack of strikeouts.
Okay, good. Yeah.
So like I don't think that's going to happen for all these guys, but I don't think it's a scenario we can rule out either. It's just the bullpen. It's the thing that keeps Andrew Friedman up at night. He said it. That's the thing. You're always trying to fix the bullpen. So I think they're going to be elite, but you don't know.
I love it, Blake. Right when I think Blake's just going to be like, hey, you know what? You can never trust relievers. And I preemptively get on top of you can never trust relievers. Blake's like, oh, yeah? You think I'm going to stop it? You can never trust relievers? What if Ryan Brazier and Evan Phillips both are awful people and awful relievers and just crap all over themselves for entirety of 2024? Then what? You know,
I do want to say
it's always up in it. I like it, Blake.
Evan Phillips, great guy, really fantastic dude to talk to. Like we're not gonna do bad person
Nothing
thing.
personal. Craps all over himself on the mound, not in his personal life.
I just said he regresses. He was very elite last year. So if he goes back to just being like a solid reliever instead of the elite level, like maybe the Dodgers end up looking for a new closer or something like that's just kind of the things that happen with relievers.
Yeah, not Evan Phillips. It's not allowed. So, all right, Sebastian, you've got you're ready to overreact to the rankings of the Dodgers' top major league ready offensive prospects. So walk me through Miguel Vargas and where he maybe slots in with a couple other guys who have had strong springs.
Yeah, so we're all talking about the possibility of who of these kind of three prospects of Vargas, Pages, and Ramos would be the first to get called up in a situation where whether it be injury or the Hayward thing does come true and they kind of decide to move on from him. I say at the start of the year, people were kind of either of the mind that Vargas and Pages are kind of fighting for first. Vargas more so in the lead because Pages is coming off that injury. But as we saw in the spring game so far, Vargas has been okay, but really Pages and Ramos have really stood out. You look at Ramos specifically, he has a 500 average and over 1,500 OPS in 10 at-bats. He has 4 strikeouts, but he also has 3 walks. So he's been kind of a nice surprise and very impressive so far. Pages also showing off a little bit of his power, his pop with the homer and the triple, making some nice plays in the outfield. So I'd say the reshuffling is now Pages, Ramos, Vargas for who would be candidates to be called up.
Blake, that would be a pretty significant shift. Pages basically didn't play all of last year with a shoulder injury, has never played above Double-A. Ramos twice could have been protected from the Rule 5 draft. I believe it's twice, and was not protected either time. Versus Vargas, the guy who was on the opening day roster a year ago. Do you agree with that? Or is this maybe the name of the game in the irresponsible overreaction?
I think it's a bit irresponsible overreaction. I think Pages is a fantastic prospect with a ton of upside. I really like him a lot. I just don't think he's going to be the first guy who would get called up in the case if they need someone. I think that would still be Vargas just because he has the experience. I do get the concern about Vargas. He hasn't shown he's hitting the ball hard. Even his few hits he had were kind of softly hit, kind of blooped in, and I think one was a ground ball that got through. So I'm not totally sold on him, like being the guy I thought he would be. I still have some hope, but it's concerning. And with Ramos, I'd say like he's more just a guy who's impressing in spring training than anything we should expect to actually come through and be a legit contributor for the Dodgers. Like you mentioned, he was a guy that wasn't protected on the 40-man roster twice, and every team passed on taking him. So he's showing off some nice skills in spring training. He showed off some nice skills in the World Baseball Classic, but I think he's more just that quadruple A type player where he's going to be impressive in some stints, but overall he's just not good enough to ever stick in the major leagues. Maybe he'll prove us wrong, but that's just how I kind of see it. And if we're talking long-term, I think Pages is the guy that you should keep an eye on, and I think the Dodgers have big plans for him.
Yeah, it's worth pointing out. I think one thing that helps what you're making, the point you're making, Sebastian, is how quickly an outfielder is needed. Like, would they be willing to trust Miguel Vargas in the outfield in the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season? To be determined. I mean, I will say this about Ramos: he hasn't played above AA. He had a 740 OPS in AA last year. That said, the thing with him, he's 23 years old. The thing with him has always been the exit velocities, if I'm remembering right. This is a guy that just absolutely hits missiles. That was the report, but then he struggled. I should say that was the report early on in his prospect career, is it was contact, and it was loud contact, 972 OPS back in 2021. But at the time, I don't think that was above rookie ball. Yeah, high A was the highest that he got that year. He gets promoted in 2022 to A ball and then to high A, A ball in 2021, promoted to halfway through 2022. And since getting promoted to high A, hasn't had an OPS over 800. So I'd be a little concerned there, but I think defensively, the point that you're making, Sebastian, is a fine one. And I think it's more so a question that Laura is asking here, and we appreciate the super chat, is how much more time do you give Vargas? Because this maybe has less to do with what we think of Ramos and Pages, Blake, and more to do with how concerned we are about Vargas.
I think it's concerning. I think there's some reason to have belief in him still, because he showed more at the end of last year when he was in AAA. We'd like to see more right now, but like we said, it's spring training and guys are working on things, and I wouldn't give up on him yet. I think he's at a low point in his trade value, so I don't see a huge point in moving him. I would just send him to AAA and see what he does. If he flames out, then, oh well, it's a bust. It happens, and hopefully he kind of figures it out and gets it going. And I just don't see a point in trading him. And like, the Dodgers don't really have any major needs where you need to say, hey, go trade Vargas and get that guy.
Yeah.
Like, it would be nice to see them get Devin Williams or something, but the Brewers seem set on competing, so don't think that's going to happen. And other teams also have to want the player, so there's just a lot of things that go into trades where I would just let Vargas try and figure out in the minors, and if he doesn't, then just is what it is there.
Yeah. No, I think it's a fair point. And, I don't think him and Lux, it's just a fascinating parallel between two guys who have similar offensive profiles, who are more hit first guys that they're trying to find a place to fit on defense, but that it also feels like there's kind of just a mental block that is preventing things from totally clicking. I will say Vargas seems like a high confidence swag type guy that makes me believe he could snap his fingers one day and just figure it out. Like, I don't know if he's the type that doubts that he can do it, even despite all of the challenges he has had. But whether or not the Dodgers have time to continue to they do have time, but whether that is 2024 or not, I think it's a fair question about where he would rank. Let's get through a couple more of these so we can get to some questions. Blake, we got two more overreactions, one from you and one from me. Your overreaction is that not just that the Dodgers will have a singular Cy Young candidate, but that they might have the top two Cy Young candidates.
Yeah, so my overreaction was Tyler Glasnow and Yoshinobu Yamamoto are going to finish 1 and 2 in the Cy Young voting. You can kind of debate the order. And I'll even throw on, I didn't mention this, but maybe Bobby Miller sneaks into the top 5 voting too. Like
Paxton top 10 while you're there.
I wouldn't go that far yet. I love Paxton a lot, but not going Cy Young candidate yet. But these are guys the Dodgers valued highly a lot. Glasnow, we've seen, he's always had the talent. The Dodgers believe he's going to stay healthy. They rewarded him with a pretty massive contract there to get him in the fold and keep him here for the next 5 years. And then with Yamamoto, they made him the highest paid pitcher in MLB history for a reason. We saw in spring training his first outing, he looked as advertised.
Yeah.
The command was there. The strikeout stuff was there. All the stuff is there that you need to see from a pitcher to be effective at the major league level. He has all the accolades to back it up. I know there's always a lot of pushback of, well, he hasn't thrown a pitch at the major league level yet, but he still faced professional hitters. He pitched well in the World Baseball Classic when he was facing major league hitters. And I think pitching is the one thing where it's easier to say, like, this is going to translate to the major league level. Like, you can make that case more so when it's a hitter coming over from a different league, because that's a bigger jump. But pitching is generally pretty universal from the league. So I'm throwing Yamamoto up there with Glasnow as the top 2 Cy Young finishers.
Well, I have good news for you, Blake. If you're interested in investment opportunities, Tyler Glasnow is currently 19-1 to win the NL Cy Young. That is 9th in the National League. He's behind the guy right in front of him, Justin Steele. How do you feel about that?
That's awful. Steele is going to regress. No, if anyone's putting that bet on there, you should not be in betting at all.
Oh, I just wanted to see your face. That's a real stat. Spencer Strider is the favorite, plus 550. Wheeler 8-1. Logan Webb 9.5-1. Yamamoto fourth, 10-1. Gallon 12-1. Fried 13-1. Senga 15-1. Steele 15-1. Glasnow 19-1. And then you get into Nola, Gray, Luzardo, Peralta, Eduardo Rodriguez. Bobby Miller 35-1. So 15th for Bobby Miller. So look, Glasnow, the bet is not on will he be good. The bet is on will he be healthy. And all the reports about Yamamoto, I've said this before, like I think he might start the All-Star game for the National League because I think there is no book on him yet, and he is going to be absolutely nasty to dudes for the first half. Now, is there regression in the second half? Does sort of the quote-unquote workload eventually catch up to him? Who knows? But look, I don't think you're crazy. Sebastian, it's unlikely, obviously, mathematically, historically, incredibly unlikely, but it's kind of hard for me, Sebastian, to poke holes in it because what's the argument against Glasnow other than health? And what's the argument against Yamamoto other than this like mysterious, like, can he pitch every 5 days thing?
Yeah, this is kind of my definition of like overreaction. Like, I never want to put too much pressure on a player to, especially from a different league, to come in and be that play at that high level right away. He obviously has the talent. You just never know. Baseball's such a hard game. He has like you said, it's hard to argue against it, but also it is not the most probable thing in the world. But he's definitely going to be good. I don't know about Cy Young. I think he'll be in the conversation. I don't know about one and two, but I think Glasnow has a better chance of winning it this season. In the future, I'd probably say heck yeah, but right now, who knows?
So you would say if you had to bet on a Dodger winning a Cy Young, this is a fun question. Most likely Dodger to win a Cy Young in the next 5 years. Glasnow, Yamamoto, or Bobby Miller? Sebastian, I'll come to you first. You say Yamamoto?
In the next 5 years, I'd probably say Yamamoto.
Blake?
I think Yamamoto's a lock in the next 5 years.
Wow! You want to talk about irresponsible things? A lock for the Cy Young.
I don't think it's that irresponsible. Like, this is a guy who's been the best pitcher in the world, essentially, for...
I don't know about essentially.
He won 3 MVPs, 3 Cy Youngs there, like...
In a different league.
Yeah, but that's still, like... What he's done is incredibly impressive. Okay, maybe you can throw, like, Garrett Cole up there and DeGrom when he's healthy, but this is a guy who's one of the top pitchers in the world. Okay, now we're going a little too far here. But Yamamoto is a guy who's one of the most talented pitchers in the world. The Dodgers have an 80 grade control on him, or command grade on him. Like, that is crazy. We haven't seen anything like that. And usually when you see guys who have command like that, they're more like fringe level 92, 93 level pitchers without strikeout stuff. This is a guy with 80 grade command and strikeout stuff. Like, you just don't see that with pitchers.
You know what comp I saw for Yamamoto this week that just got me absolutely fired up that I think is fantastic as it related to his command? Did you see this, Blake?
I didn't, but I'm going to guess like Glavin or something, or Maddox.
Sebastian?
I was going to say Kyle Hendricks.
Or Zach Greinke?
Zach Greinke.
Yeah. I saw the
Greinke. I did see that.
Oh my gosh. That's such a good comp because it's not like 99, 100 mile an hour fastball. But if you just think of Greinke at his peak with some deception and, you know, a 96 mile an hour, 25-year-old in Yamamoto, like, oof, it's good stuff. So I'm with you on Yamamoto. I thought you were going to say Bobby Miller, honestly, Blake, but it's fine. Okay. Last one here. Irresponsible spring training overreaction. Guys, Gavin Stone's back. He's back. Just pencil it in. 2023 washed year for Gavin Stone. Just wipe it from the record. This is what Keith Law said about Gavin Stone 12 months ago. Quote, Stone has since emerged as the Dodgers' second best pitching prospect and isn't that far behind their top guy, Bobby Miller. 2022, he pitched at 3 levels in the minor leagues. At no point did he have an ERA over 1.6 while striking out 34% of the guys he faced. He had foot troubles last year that derailed some things. He had 34 bad innings at the major league level. I know he struggled at the minor league level. He's looked pretty good in 2 appearances in spring training so far. So, Blake, Gavin Stone, you mentioned it, which I wasn't even going to be willing to say. You think he might be on the opening day roster?
Wouldn't shock me. I think he is definitely in the conversation for that spot, and Emmett Sheehan is yet to pitch, so he was dealing with some body soreness, so who knows if he's going to be ready on time. Landon Knack is a guy who they've projected as more of a mid-rotation starter, whereas with Gavin Stone, you might get some more upside. So, yeah, I mean, I could see him making the opening day roster. Saying he's back, I've had hope for him. To say he's back at this point, I'd like to see it a little more. But like as we've said throughout this whole segment, it's overreactions. We're not being totally logical with all these. So, like, yeah, sure, let's go with Gavin Stone's back.
Yeah, and look, when we're saying what is he back to, I mean, like, if he develops into a really good number 3 starter, like, I think that's far more than what people are projecting him to be after the last 12 months that we saw from him. But I think you make a great point, because the other thing with Sheehan is how many innings do they want Emmett Sheehan to throw this year? And if it's not a full year, they could very well have him doing the Bobby Miller thing where it's like a fake injury that delays his spring training and slowly progresses him in so that he doesn't kind of make his debut until May. And if that's the case, we know Gavin Stone a year ago, they already kind of thought was major league ready. They weren't feeling the need to sort of hold him back innings wise. So Sebastian, briefly, before we get to some questions, give me your thoughts on Gavin Stone.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think if you have a plus pitch as good as Gavin Stone's, there's always going to be a shot for you to make a major league roster. It'll be interesting. Like Blake, like you've both said already, it is overreactions. I think third rotation kind of guy is his kind of ceiling. Yeah, it'll just be interesting. I think he has a good shot to make the roster.
Yeah, no, look, I hadn't thought about it. So, Blake, I like that. For him as a guy that could possibly be that number 5 spot to begin the year, I don't think that's crazy at all. And I'm not saying he's ahead of Sheehan, like organizationally long term. So we'll see. All right, if you've got some questions, throw those in the chat. All caps questions. I know we're well over the hour mark, but we'll take a few of those. So we'd appreciate if you want to throw all caps questions, then put your question in there. We'll get to if we've got any fun food type questions, maybe we'll get to those at the end. We need to dig into Sebastian's food history here. So we'll slowly over time get that. Here we go. I like this. We're just keeping the theme, GI, with the irrational spring training overreactions here. Irresponsible, irrational, all of the above. Considering how bad Fireisen looked tonight, the fact he hasn't pitched for over a year, is he a lock for a roster spot on opening day? Blake, I actually wondered this myself. He was bad tonight. It's his first appearance in 2 years. Do you think he's a lock for the opening day roster, Blake?
I don't think so, because they could always send him to the minor leagues and get him some more time to shake the rust off, or put him on the IL list for a week and then send him out on a rehab assignment. I think there's a lot of spots in the Dodger bullpen that are already kind of filled, and say they want to keep a specific player on the roster for their Korea series or something. Like, no, I wouldn't really say any of those guys returning from injuries are locks until they kind of show it a little more into spring training.
Okay. Justin, talk about Chapman. We talked briefly. My joke was, if a tree falls in the forest, does anybody hear it? If a player signs for $54 million for the San Francisco Giants, does anybody care? Yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. He's good. Him and Jorge Soler can have some fun in San Francisco, and I will not be worried about them at all. Player has a question. Do you think Ohtani will get walked more by opposing pitchers this year than previous years? Sebastian, I find it impossible to believe he will be walked more, because Freddie Freeman's doubles to the cap will be free RBIs for Freddie. Like, is that how you see this?
Yeah, like having him hit behind Mookie and then having Freddie behind him. If Mookie gets on, you can't put him anywhere. If Ohtani's up there with bases empty, you don't want to put him on in front of Freddie. So it'll be a healthy mix of like pitching around, but they'll want to pitch around him, but you can't really afford to.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I'll come right back to you, Sebastian, because Michael says, why haven't you talked about how amazing Sweeney and Gauthier, I think Gauthier, however they pronounce it, have been? They're putting the ball in play constantly. Sebastian had Sweeney as one of his irrational predictions, and I was like, maybe we just boot that one, save it. So here you go, Sebastian. The floor is yours to talk about how amazing Trey Sweeney has been.
Mine wasn't super irrational. We changed it because it was in the middle of irrational. I just said he makes the roster next season just because of the fact that Chris Taylor, Max Muncy are all free agents 2027, Miguel Rojas free agent in 2026. So I saw a spot for him on the left side of the field somewhere, whether it be third or short. But yeah, with Sweeney, I really like his approach at the plate and his swing overall. He really stays connected in his upper and lower halves. His hands are really married with his legs and his swing. He stays inside the ball, knob to ball. Just really good bat to ball skills. With the first 3 games, he had a hit in each of the games, and I was like, okay, let's see where the pop is. And then against the Reds, he showed it off, home run in that game. So yeah, he's been really impressive.
Yeah, I think those are all fair. Austin Gauthier, do you know how to pronounce it, Blake?
I've heard Gauthier and Gauthier. I don't know. We'll have to get some clarification from the Dodgers when they send out their pronunciation guide.
This is classic undrafted free agent by the Dodgers who has just mashed literally everywhere. And I've heard his name mentioned in a couple of my conversations with people about Dodger prospects. He hits the grand slam that puts them ahead tonight. I don't think we're talking about him in the 2024 mix, but I feel like people have probably been saying we're not talking about him and fill in the blank and been wrong for like 3 straight seasons here with the Dodgers. I believe he got as high as AA last year. So, I mean, any chance this guy makes an impact, Blake? I believe he's a second baseman.
He's kind of a utility guy more so, but mainly second base. Yeah. I wouldn't say this year. They have kind of a set roster with utility guys this year. And that's before we even talk about like Chris Owings, who's been impressing, and Kevin Padlow types, and just some of those minor leaguers who will probably get called up at some point during the season and then play a week and get DFA'd or go back to the minor leagues. So I don't really see a spot for Gauthier this year, but he's a guy who has some hype among Dodger prospect analysts and who could end up being one of their future utility guys, who kind of a fun, gritty type player that's going to be a solid bat for you when you put him in the lineup, but never necessarily a starting type player.
Yeah, fair enough. We got some good food questions here, but let me get to a couple more baseball. Larry wants to know, how do the Korea games affect the Dodgers home games? Who's the home team? Is it 1-1, Blake?
Yeah. So for the first game, the Padres are the home team. The second game is going to be the Dodgers as the home team. And yeah, that's how it's going to work.
Okay. Let's see. Here we go. Derek had this question. Sebastian, if the Dodgers go to a 6-man rotation, will it impact the starters who are used to pitching every 5 days, do you think?
I mean, sometimes in the playoffs, teams will kind of organize their rotations and then the rest days in between the series to give their starters an extra day rest sometimes. That is just in the short term. In the long term, who knows? But I guess it kind of just depends on the player and the kind of their routine. So maybe they have those conversations with each player individually, see who's more comfortable with that.
One thing I would say is, like, baseball teams have off days. So if you have a 5-man rotation and there's an off day, then those guys are getting an extra day of rest. So I think, Blake, I'll let you chime in here. I think this is kind of overblown because guys are not like, it's not like they pitch on every 5th day for the last 10 years of their lives. It's actually way more random than that.
Yeah, I think it was Bill Plunkett who wrote an article earlier this offseason talking about it. And by his math, the Dodgers basically gave their pitchers an extra day of rest on like 60% of their starts or something. So they were essentially using a 6-man rotation 60% of the season. They just didn't call it that. But with the bullpen games and guys getting called up and off days and all that, like, it essentially works out that way anyways. The Dodgers always try and get their pitchers rest. And I don't think it's a huge deal. Like, none of these guys have really set schedules. We saw Yamamoto pitching once a week. Glasnow has dealt with a bunch of injury problems. Bobby Miller still hasn't pitched in a full season yet. James Paxton has, of course, had his injury problems. So I think rest is only going to benefit the pitchers more so than end up affecting them too much.
Okay. Adam with a super chat here. Adam, we greatly appreciate that always. Any surprise or underrated teams for 2024 as you guys look around the league? Obviously, the Arizona Diamondbacks were kind of a team that we mentioned a couple times on this show as teams that we liked more than some other teams in the National League West. Some of us liked them as just a team on paper. Some of us liked them more than that. But Blake, any teams you want to? Colorado Rockies? You want to be the first guy on the Rockies?
No, not the Rockies. I'm looking at the teams right now. I feel like this year there's kind of a lot of set teams, so I'll throw out maybe the Reds as a team that could kind of surprise a bit. They're kind of in a weak division. I don't love the Cubs roster. I don't love the Cardinals roster. So I think the Reds have a lot of good young talent and could kind of make a leap this year and take a step forward. I think Hunter Green has the potential to be an ace. So I'll go with the Reds for this year.
One team that jumps to mind, I mean, the Cardinals were awful last year. Is it possible they just bounce back because they still have good players? I know those guys are getting older, but I don't know. Like, Blake, you're giving me dirty looks.
Do they have any players like under 35 on their roster right now?
Hey,
like
35-year-olds are people too, Blake. I want you to know that.
Yeah, but like baseball wise, I don't think that's the kind of roster that's going to carry you deep into a season. That's just how I see
fair.
it.
I'm just thinking about surprise teams.
I got one.
Go for it.
It sounds insane. The Angels, purely because I really love Ron Washington as a manager. I think he'll be a really good influence on them. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but I think they'll surprise, not good teams. I'm just going to say they're going to surprise people and be like better than people think.
Does that mean like 80 wins for them? What's your number here?
I'd probably say around 80. I think mine is more long term. I really like the Ron Washington hire for the Angels. I think he'll be really good for them in developing them in the future. But
that'd be the biggest Ewing theory success story ever if Ohtani leaves and then they become good right after Ohtani leaves. It would be amazing. All right, let's get to some dumb questions here. I can't put it up because it's old, but we got asked this a couple weeks ago and by somebody on Twitter. French dip sandwich versus Philly cheesesteak. These are both great sandwiches, both elite. I think the French dip is harder to find, but I would still go Philly cheesesteak if presented with both. Blake?
I don't even think I've had a French dip. So like I'll go with Philly cheesesteak by default. I do like those.
Okay. Sebastian?
I love a good French dip. French dip all the way.
There you go. Yeah, this is like a crazy take. You ready for this? When I was a kid, we'd get French dip sandwiches from Arby's, which I'm not out here advocating for Arby's. I just want to make that clear. But there you go, Blake. Next time you're at Arby's, pick yourself up a French dip, okay?
Big John Heyman fan with the Arby's take here.
Is he a big Arby's guy?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay, somebody said, which of the three of you makes the best burger? Who amongst Jeff, Sebastian, and Blake makes the best burger if they had to cook one? Blake, how do you feel about your ability to cook a burger?
I have no cooking abilities at all.
I wasn't going to say that. I was going to guess that though. Sebastian, are you a grill guy?
My dad's the grill master. I don't really have. So he takes all the responsibility. So I haven't had the opportunity. Who knows? Okay. But I do have some cooking skills. I can make a mean breakfast croissant. Okay. So maybe those skills can translate. Who knows?
Okay. So you just haven't had the opportunity yet.
Yeah.
I mean, I figured as the dad in the group, I felt like this was going to be an easy one for me. I didn't want to presume. Blake doesn't strike me as a big stand around the barbecue cooking guy. Sebastian, kind of the youngest of the three. So there you go. Safely me on that one.
But how about the toppings? Like make a burger that way.
Okay. Talk to me, Blake.
I'm just gonna throw it out there. I think a lot of people are probably gonna say it's weird, but I love a peanut butter burger.
So there's a place called Killer Burger that's in Oregon. I don't know how far it is expanded, but their go-to is a peanut butter burger, and it's actually great. If you've ever had peanut sauce on like Thai food, it's basically just that, and it's really good. It's surprisingly very good, is all I'm gonna say.
Everyone always gives like weird takes to it or like, what are you talking about? But every single person I've convinced to try it ends up liking it or loving it.
Now, are you saying you just straight up put Jif peanut butter on a burger bun? Or you're talking about places that make peanut butter burgers?
I'll do it myself, like with some cheese and bacon or something, and then the peanut butter. But I think there's only one place I've been to that has actually done it. So,
but you're straight up putting just regular peanut butter on it.
Yeah, you can.
Okay, because the place I'm talking about is like more of a peanut sauce, which I think is different. But
I mean, you're still getting
Sebastian, what's going on a burger if you're making it?
I'm the worst person to ask. My parents and family always gives me trouble for.
This is what we want, Sebastian. Give us the truth.
I'm just boring. I just go lettuce and bacon sometimes, and that's it. I'm not a cheese. I don't like cheese on my burgers. I only like cheese on my pizza. I don't know. I just don't like the texture, so I'm just a real plain guy.
Like
When it comes
somehow
to burgers.
Dodger Blue has hired the only two human beings that don't like cheese on their burgers.
It's true. But wait, do you like cheese on like other things? Because Scott doesn't like cheese on anything.
Not really. I mean,
Only
I'll eat like a mozzarella like stick and stuff like that, but like only really on pizza that I like cheese.
It's amazing. Does
And
Scott eat pizza? I can't remember.
I don't think he does. We have to vet these people better. Like, we can't keep hiring the people who hate cheese.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Egg on burger is fantastic. That's the other one I'll throw out. Besides the obvious toppings, egg on a burger is fantastic. Oh, this is a good one. Justin wants to know, what's the best temperature for a steak? He likes his rare. Blake?
I used to go with well done.
Oh, man.
But now I've kind of moved more into the medium well range. I don't like steak that much to begin with, though.
If you don't think peer pressure works, there is case in point number one.
Like, just give me chicken over steak all day, every day. Like, it's not even a choice for me, really.
It's crazy. Sebastian?
Medium.
Yeah, I'm a medium rare guy, depending on the place. If it's a nice place, I'll go medium rare. If it's a questionable, slightly chain restaurant type place, I might go medium. But yeah, that's oh, here we go. Dave wants to know who in your crew is or was the best baseball player.
The honest opinion, I can't say. The opinion I'm gonna say is I'm gonna say me.
Daniel is the right answer, by the way. Daniel played college baseball. So if you want to know the truth, I don't know anything about Sebastian's game. Daniel played college baseball. Blake insists he could get a hit off of him. And Blake is the only person alive who believes that to be true.
I'm just saying, Daniel has never wanted to face me every time I've offered. So until he stops ducking me, I can't give him any props.
GI wants to know, ketchup on a hot dog, Sebastian, heresy or no?
Again, I eat, well, one, I don't really eat hot dogs anymore. But two, I just eat the hot dog. Nothing on it.
Plain.
Yep. Same with burgers.
I've got no issue. I'll eat a plain Costco hot dog if that's what's in front of me and I don't have time and don't want to deal with the mess. But I will put ketchup. Ketchup. Like if I'm at Costco, ketchup, mustard, onions is my go-to.
I can't get over a plain hot dog. That's like the weirdest thing in the world to me.
I just don't like condiments in general, really.
Wow. That might be the craziest food take. Condiments are incredible. So, okay.
Yeah. I'll do ketchup on a hot dog. That's what I usually do. I also like cheese. I like onion a lot on hot dogs. Dodger Stadium sadly got rid of those, but I think sneaky underrated.
That said they came back.
They might have, but they don't do it in the press box. Sneaky underrated is putting some of the nacho cheese on a hot dog. Pretty good.
Okay. All right. I don't know the answer to this one. Derek wants to know who's the best MLB The Show player. Blake, do you know the answer to that?
The answer is
Oh, hold on. Wait, you guys played in Arizona a year ago, right?
We did. The truthful answer is Scott. He plays that a lot and is very competitive and good on it. The tournament winner was me beating Scott, and he'll have some excuses about the temperature and the weather and all that or whatever. But
he complained about the controller.
You can't control that kind of stuff. You got to deal with the cards you're dealt. So, I'm just saying I won the tournament, and that's all we know about this, really.
Sebastian, do you play MLB The Show?
Yeah, but I don't do the PCI. I just do normal hitting. I don't like change.
See, that takes you out of contention immediately.
Jason, our food guy. Well done steaks, no condiments. What the hell is happening on this show? Jason,
well, I barbecue on ribs and stuff, but that's really it.
Yeah,
like no condiments ever, but just not on certain stuff.
It's crazy. Well, there you have it, folks. Thank you so much for joining us on this Friday night show. This was wild. I did not see this ending the way that it did. Irresponsible overreactions. I think we got to get a name for this Friday night show. 9 p.m. Friday nights. We're doing irresponsible things. We're having terrible food takes. There's something happens here on this 9 p.m. Friday night show. So thank you everybody for joining us. If you are catching up on this after the fact via podcast or via YouTube, thank you. You can check us out on YouTube, Dodger Blue 1958. Subscribe, ring the notification bell. Podcast, Apple, Spotify, Google, search for DodgerHeads. You will find us. We've been saying this every Tuesday night, every Friday night, every Sunday night, live content from right here on Dodger Blue Dodger Blue 1958. It'll be post-game shows once the season starts, but until then, it'll kind of be a pretty normal 7 o'clock on Tuesdays and Sundays, 9 o'clock on Fridays. That is Blake Williams. That is Sebastian Ibarra. My name is Jeff Spiegel. Thank you for joining us, folks. Enjoy the rest of your night. And as always, go Dodgers.